Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. Unlike the Friday edition, we're dedicating the Tuesday podcast to answering your garden questions. Stay tuned to find out how you can get your garden question into the program. So come on, let's do this. It's Tuesday, time for another edition of Garden Basics, and on Tuesday we like to answer your garden questions. We, being me, and of course America's favorite retired college horticultural professor, Debbie Flower, is here, I think.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. Welcome back to the Butylon jungle.
Yeah, it's pretty. Lots of flowers.
Even though it is winter, we can watch the little hummingbirds flit about.
Yes.
This is nice. All right. We like to answer your garden questions, and we really like it, especially if you could tell us with your voice. So that means give us a call at 916-292-8964 and leave a message there. 916-292-8964. Or if you don't want to use your phone, you can leave an audio question without making a phone call via SpeakPipe. Go to speakpipe.com/gardenbasics, one word, Garden Basics, and shout out your message, and we'll get that. We still like email. I like text. I'm a text kind of guy. So you can text us at 916-292-8964. You can email to fred@farmerfred.com, or you can fill out the contact box at gardenbasics.net. We have an email question from Marianne, who writes in and says, on the back of the seed packet, there is a column that says start indoors. Then underneath it, it says direct sow. This means to plant it directly outside, correct? We don't start indoors, then transplant? Here's Debbie Flower with 2 words of advice.
Well, if I was going to say choices.
Yes. Or it depends.
It depends. Exactly. Yes. What that seed packet is telling you is you can start it indoors, and then they give you some instructions. Usually they tell you a certain number of weeks before your average last date of frost, which would have to do with your hardiness zone, and to start it at a certain temperature, plant the seed a certain depth, keep it warm, moist, certain amount of light, and it will germinate in that condition indoors somewhere. It could be in your house. It could be in your greenhouse. It could be wherever you choose. And then if it says plant outdoors, or what was the word? Direct sow. Direct sow does mean to plant it right into the place in the garden where you want it to grow. And that will have another set of directions and tell you when to do it. In that case, it's typically so many weeks before your last average date of frost, or so many weeks after your last date of frost, or when temperatures settle at, for instance, 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and they mean night temperatures. And not just that you had one night of 55 degrees, you had nights that were between 50 and 55 for a week or more. Night temperatures reflect soil temperatures. They may also tell you what soil temperature is best for seed starting.
And that may be a little bit sooner in your area if you're gardening in raised beds, because raised beds tend to heat up a little bit quicker. But again, once those plants come up, they are at the mercy of those nighttime temperatures. So really, that's good advice as far as making sure that nighttime temperatures are above whatever that seed packet said it should be, 50, 55 degrees. It depends.
Right. And when you're starting indoors, you need those temperatures as well. Sometimes it will say as high as 80 to 85 to start the seed indoors. But be aware you don't have to increase the temperature in your house to 80 to 85. You just need to keep the roots of that plant or seedling, or what will become the roots, the seed, that warm until it germinates. And so the best thing for that is a heating pad, which is they make bottom heat pads for seed starting.
They're usually sold as propagation mats. They're widely available online, and at high-quality nurseries will have them as well. They're usually about 18 inches long and maybe 12 inches wide, and they hold a tray very nicely.
Right, and you can't feel the heat. They don't heat up as warm as a human body. Just trust that they're on, and it will warm the soil. It also means you're going to have to water it more frequently because it will dry the soil out faster.
Yeah, the temperature of that propagation mat is really dependent upon the surrounding air temperature wherever it is. So if it's in a warmer room, that soil propagation mat will have a little bit of a warmer temperature than that.
But it will heat the root zone, and that's the only part that the plant needs warm during this germination process.
Now, does it mean that you should start everything indoors and then transplant it outdoors? or are there certain seeds that maybe should be best planted outdoors first?
Some plants don't like to have their roots disturbed. Peppers happen to be one, although we buy pepper transplants or grow them ourselves all the time. Zinnias are another one. Bougainvillea, which I don't know that anybody is that's an ornamental flowering shrub-like plant. I don't know that anybody except a commercial grower would be starting them from seed, but they really don't like to have their roots disturbed.
Well, one of your favorites, cucumbers, don't like their roots disturbed either.
Cucumbers, corn, watermelon, melon, pumpkin, squash, all of those I think are best direct seeded. You will find them for sale already germinated, but you get a better crop established better sooner if you direct sow it into your garden.
Some seed packets have better information than others.
I agree 100%.
And if you are at a good nursery that has an array of seed packets from different seed companies, maybe make your choice on which seed company to choose based on the information on the back of the packet.
Mm-hmm. Yes. May we name names?
Yeah, go ahead.
The one I like the very best is Renee's Garden Seeds. And when I was teaching, I did a class about reading the seed packet and discovered that by going through my many old seed packets, there are some seed packets that tell you almost nothing. And others, like Renee's, give you lots of information, very detailed. Her seed packets tell you when to start, how deep to plant, how far apart to plant, what to look for, temperatures, all kinds of great information for both direct seeding and for starting in a container and transplanting. And also growing instructions and harvest and how to use the plant, the product of the plant, the fruit of the plant. They're really very informative, available at many nurseries and online.
And she also has that same information. If you accidentally lose the packet, you can go on to reneesgarden.com and find the same information online that she has. And speaking of what do you do with all those tomatoes or peppers or whatever, she has a lot of good recipe books available too.
Yeah, very, very good company to get to know.
Now, the question comes up, well, when to plant? Because some seed companies put information on there that may be kind of vague, other than nighttime temperatures. It may just be a map of the United States with different colors, and you got to kind of squint at that little map and figure out which color you are, and then hope that you haven't undergone too severe of a climate change.
Right.
And do it that way. For USDA Zone 9, this is just self-aggrandizement on my part, but the Farmer Fred vegetable planting calendar for the Central Valley, East Bay, and low foothills of Northern California is actually a pretty good barometer for planting on a month-to-month basis for probably 30 or so different vegetables, and it would be applicable to a lot of USDA Zone 9. And I've seen nurseries print this and have it available around here. It'd be nice if they paid me, but no.
Yeah, it would be.
No, it's okay. I would rather get out good information. In fact, I'm giving it away. If you go to my newsletter, the Beyond the Garden Basics newsletter on Substack, one of the current issues have that available that you can print out. So go to substack.com/garden basics and you can find it there.
Well, you can just Google Beyond the Garden Basics and it comes up.
Oh, that's nice, too.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. On Substack.
Yes, it shows that it's on Substack, but you can get to it that way.
Yeah. And then you can print it out and hang it on your refrigerator if you want. I keep it posted in the office. It just is a good reminder. For instance, we're coming up to February, and it's amazing the number of vegetables that you can start from seed or plant in February, including I use an ampersand. That's not an ampersand.
@
sign. The @ sign to indicate that it needs to be started indoors first in a protected area and then grown indoors for a few weeks and then set out. So there are more sensitive plants that way. Tomatoes are that way.
Right.
Peppers
Tomatoes are right now. When I was teaching, we had to work within the calendar of a college semester, and school would have started last week probably. And we have a plant sale. We would have a plant sale in March, and I would start tomatoes probably this week. That would be one of our very first lab classes. Rush them through, lab safety and cleanliness and all the rules, and then Here's some seeds, plant them.
Yeah, there's a lot of seeds that need that little boost by indoor starting, and then you can transplant them outside. Tomatoes just being one of them. Peppers are that way as well. And
especially if you live, we don't know where.
Yeah, that's another thing, people. If you're going to write in, tell us where you are. All gardening is local. Thank you.
If you live here in California, in Central Valley, where we live, we have such a long growing season. I think people are tempted to start throwing tomatoes at each other in August, and the season can go on. I've had tomatoes at my Thanksgiving dinner. So you can start them by direct sowing, which occurs later, 4 to 6 weeks for us later than starting them from seed. I'm 4 to 6 weeks behind in getting a crop, but I have such a long growing season that it kind of doesn't matter. But in places with shorter growing seasons, my son lives in Minnesota. They're under snow right now, not feet of it yet, but it's very cold. It was below zero at his house last week. So no chance of starting tomatoes outdoors. And certainly if you start them indoors, they're going to be way too big to transplant out. So they have a short growing season. And for that, starting them indoors is really, really beneficial.
Now, you may be saying, well, why can't I just throw some tomato seeds out there and let them come up? Well, based on my experience of growing tomatoes, and some of them fall off, and then some of them sprout and start growing. That usually doesn't happen until July or August. And by the time they're mature and producing fruit, which could be anywhere from 55 to 80 days, chances are it's going to be too late.
Right.
For that. Peppers,
especially for a short season growing place.
Have you ever seen a pepper sprout from seed?
No, I have never seen a pepper sprout. Tomatoes pretty regularly from the ones that fall off and sit there and rot. Yeah. And when they do that, you have a whole forest of tomatoes, and tomatoes planted too closely together will not bear fruit.
Yeah, they should be about 18 inches apart.
Minimum, yes.
Minimum, yeah. So, yeah, that's why you start tomatoes and peppers indoors about 6 to 8 weeks before. Now, in my experience, as far as tomatoes and peppers go, generally it's if you wait 8 weeks from seed for your tomatoes, at the end of that 8-week period, you're going to have a jungle. And one good piece of advice to have is if that plant gets to about 3 or 4 inches tall, I would transplant it from whatever pot you started in into a larger pot, and then keep growing it out indoors. And it's amazing how much a mature. Hey, we're in Barking Dog Studios. Can you tell? It's amazing how you can tell how quickly those transplanted tomatoes are when you go from a 3-inch pot to a 1-gallon pot and then into the ground. They just mature quicker.
Yeah, well, when you transplant a tomato, you bury the stem. You don't want to necessarily. So when you're going from a 4-inch pot to a 1-gallon or a number 1, you can pretty much just drop the plant in, and you want several sets of leaves sticking out the top. Cut the roots, bury it all, and you will get roots out of that buried stem. When you're doing it in the garden, because the garden soil is much heavier and has less oxygen in it and the drainage is different, instead you dig a trench, a sideways trench, and maybe the bottom of that trench is 6 inches deep. And you would lay that 4-inch plant sideways with the root ball down in the deep part, curve it up through the trench, and then I use a little stake, can be a popsicle stick, doesn't have to be very tall, and to hold those few leaves and the tip of the stem out of the ground that are going to be your above ground parts. So they will be upright. And then you cover that over. But roots will grow from that stem. And that's one of the reasons it becomes such a vigorous plant as you do move it up into bigger pots.
One word of warning this time of year, especially here in USDA Zone 9. In February, you tend to have nurseries who will bring in some little tomato plants and little pepper plants that are fresh from somebody's greenhouse where it's 70 or 80 degrees and offer them for sale. If you took those home and planted them in the ground, kerplunk, you'll be back at that nursery in May to buy new ones because they will have died.
Just the fact that they came out of somebody's greenhouse and immediately went up for sale is a problem. Plants that have been started indoors need to go through a process called hardening off. And hardening off is preparing them to withstand outdoor conditions compared to indoor conditions. Indoor conditions, you have controlled temperature, humidity, watering, and wind. You put the plants outdoors, the day to night temperature fluctuates. much more than it does indoors. The day-to-day temperature fluctuates much more than it does indoors. There's greater wind. There's lower humidity in general, especially if you're starting indoors with a cover, a hood or a plastic cover over those baby plants. And the sun is brighter.
Yeah.
So you have to get those plants to adjust to that process. And it's a gradual exposure of the plants to different conditions outdoors, starting in full shade, protected from the wind for maybe 3 days, and bringing them in at night, then putting them outside in a little less protected area, bringing them in at night, putting them outside, and you move them to more wind, more sun as you go on. You need to be home. Do not start this process when you're going to be working very long days because they typically need water twice a day when you first start it.
Gardeners don't take vacations in April.
But if you have a big project at work and you're going to be gone from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then come home and crash out on the couch, you have to have time to tend them.
Now, before any local nursery gets the idea that they want to bury me underneath a 8 cubic yard pile of compost or potting soil, I'm not saying don't buy those plants now. If you go to a nursery in February and you see tomato and pepper plants, and you go, wow, I don't think they're going to have this variety for much longer. I better buy it now. Keep it indoors in a sunny spot and grow it for 6 weeks or so, or whenever those outdoor temperatures get, as you said, to above 50 degrees on a regular basis.
Right. And the other thing besides strong sun or strong light is provide wind.
That would be a fan.
That would be a fan, right?
Okay.
Right.
As opposed to blowing on it every 10 minutes.
The experiment that proved this was done by shaking the plants for 10 minutes a day. If you want to do that instead, have at it. But yes, the thing that makes a stem strong is that it moves in the wind, in what's naturally occurring outdoors. And so you want to imitate that indoors, and that creates it's called reaction tissue, the cells that will allow that stem to stand straight up. If you've started seeds and they lean over, the stems are very thin, they lean towards the window, you turn them around, they lean back the other direction. They are growing toward the light, and that's a good thing, that's a positive thing, but you want those stems to stand up, so you want them to move in the wind.
There used to be a long time ago a board table game of football. It was called the Electric Vibrating NFL Football Game, where you'd put the little players on what looked like a football field, and you'd flip the switch, and the whole thing would start vibrating, and the players would move around.
Aha!
Very random. That would be great for
look
young
at that at your local thrift store. Yeah,
yeah, and you plug it into a timer, and it comes on. How often would you run a vibrating football game?
They just need 10 minutes a day. So
okay.
The other is get your kids involved. If they have a little remote control vehicle, put your little tomato plants on that vehicle and have them drive it around the house recklessly for 10 minutes a day, and then clean up after them. But the plant will have had the shaking that it needs to create a strong stem.
The official name of that game, by the way, is the NFL Electric Football from Tudor Games.
Oh, wow.
If you want it, and I see it's for sale on Amazon. So there you go.
Wow. Something to look forward to.
Create reaction tissue with the help of your favorite football team, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
There you go.
Well, I think that pretty much covers everything Marianne asked and more because, well, that's what we do here.
Yeah, we went down another scenic bypass or two.
That's fine. So I think the big piece of advice here would be to choose your seed packets carefully, or at least if they have an online source with more information, then get your seeds from them. But make sure that you read and follow all label directions.
Right. Seeds included.
Yeah, seeds included. All right. Debbie Flower, thanks so much for your help.
My pleasure, Fred.
As the days get longer in late January and early February, you just might be lingering a little bit longer in your garden in the milder climates of the United States. And you may have noticed that the 2024 weed season has already begun. This past weekend, I spent a good amount of time digging out on rather wet soil the appropriately named popseed weed, which is also known as hairy bittercress, which can seemingly grow overnight from an innocent-looking, ground-hugging rosette of edible leaves and produce stalks about 9 to 12 inches tall of wiry stems with a small, delicate-looking 4-petaled white flower at the end of those stems. And if you don't attack the hairy bittercress weed at this stage, well, before you know it, it's gone to seed. And when you attempt to disturb that hairy bittercress weed that's gone to seed, the plant can fling up to 600 seeds in all directions, including in your face. And so you may want to don a pair of safety glasses to keep this weed seed out of your eyes. The ones that don't hit you in your face can be flung for several feet, creating a new crop of hairy bittercress weeds for your future yard. They can germinate not only in your garden and lawn, but also in cracks in your brick or concrete hardscaping areas, gravel walkways, and wherever it can find a bit of soil to take root. Needless to say, it's spreading throughout California and in other areas as well. One way to limit the spread of hairy bittercress weeds is to cover the plant with a bowl, gently lift one side of the bowl, and then get under the weed and dig it out. That way, you avoid getting hit in the face by the flying seeds, as well as keeping those seeds that do escape in the immediate area. One of my favorite digging tools for weeds is a Hori Hori Knife. It's a favorite garden implement of many seasoned gardeners. And we talked about the Hori Hori Knife last Tuesday in episode 302, entitled Good Garden Gifts. You might want to go back and listen to that for more information about the Hori Hori Knife, as well as another popular garden implement to keep your knees from getting wet while pulling or digging weeds out between late winter rainstorms, and that's the garden kneeler and seat. Again, it's all talked about in episode 302 of the Garden Basics podcast, entitled Good Garden Gifts. And there's another weed taking hold right now that also produces way too many seeds in late winter. It's Oxalis. It can go by common names such as creeping wood sorrel or Bermuda buttercup. Again, hand weeding this time of year is the best remedy. And we delved into the Oxalis weed patch with America's favorite retired college horticultural professor Debbie Flower back in 2021 in episode 153. Here it is. A few weeks ago, we were talking about nutgrass, nutsedge, and what a hated weed that is for many of us. Well, many of you chimed in on the Get Growing with Farmer Fred Facebook page to say, nutgrass, heck, you haven't seen my patch of whatever. And a lot of votes came in for whatever, including things like star thistle and bindweed and Johnson grass and kudzu and ivy. And a lot of people don't like Oxalis. And there's even desirable Oxalis. But this particular Oxalis, you don't want. It can take a lot of punishment and come back for more. Debbie Flower is here. She has pulled her share of Oxalis.
From many places.
From many places. And actually, maybe pull is not the right word. Maybe it's dig out.
No, I pull.
Yeah.
Mostly, one major thing to keep in mind when you're trying to control weeds is BIS. BISS, before it sets seed.
Okay, BIS.
If all you're going to do is pull, and I like pulling weeds, it's therapeutic. Mm-hmm. I can remember sitting in my front yard in Portland, Oregon, pulling wood sorrel out of my lawn just to calm myself down after some event. So if you want to get it out, if you do nothing else, get the weed out before it sets seed, especially with this wood sorrel. Wood sorrel creates this tall capsule of seeds, and when it opens, it throws its many, many, many seeds long distances.
Oh, like hairy bittercress.
Yes. Like hairy bittercress. You're absolutely right. So pulling it, I mean, those seeds can go 10 feet away, and so then you've got another infestation. Pulling it is helpful if you leave any part of the taproot or any part of the root or any part of the stem. You have not killed the plant, but at least you have removed the above ground portions that you got your hands on before they set seed.
There are several common names for the weedy oxalises. Creeping wood sorrel, Bermuda buttercup are two of the more common names. It can be found in lawns, flower beds, gardens, nurseries, greenhouses, and basically throughout the world.
Right. Cracks in the driveway, cracks in the sidewalk, the place between the asphalt and the concrete on the street. Wherever it can get its little tiny seed, it will grow. And of course, in those tight spaces, it's harder to remove. It is a perennial. The oxalises are perennial. I have ornamental oxalis in my yard. It's one of my husband's favorite plants, but it does not produce these seed pods. So it's just one clump that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's only there in the spring. Actually, a little bit of it is still flowering into the fall. It is not invasive. This wood sorrel and the Bermuda buttercup, which are two different species of Oxalis, are the weedy Oxalis.
Did you know that the Greek word for sour is oxalis?
Oh, I didn't know.
And it refers to the acidic nature of what you would find inside it. And they warn people who have livestock to remove any of oxalis because they can suffer from oxalate poisoning.
Oh, that's swelling of the mucous membranes, and so they could suffocate.
So one good reason that if you do have oxalis and you have a livestock, you do want to remove that from the area.
It can be a little bit difficult to identify what is oxalis and what isn't.
It looks like clover.
It looks like clover,
yeah.
Right. True clover has a round-headed flower, but the oxalis and another plant called medicago, or is in the genus medicago, also looks like a clover. So just looking at the leaves isn't going to be super helpful.
Right, the leaves are three-leaf. It looks like three-leaf clover with a yellow flower.
Right, that's the clue. Any of the three that we're talking about, the medicago, the Bermuda buttercup, and the wood sorrel, all have yellow flowers, and clover does not.
Yeah, the medicago is burr clover is the common name for that one, and that too can be found in many parts of the world. What's interesting is it's useful as a pasture plant. Because it fixes nitrogen.
Exactly. The medicago fixes nitrogen. It's in the legume family, and legumes are things that fix nitrogen in their roots. I used it in teaching. You could find it all over campus. So I would pull some up and take it into the classroom to show the nodules on the roots that are formed in nitrogen fixation.
It can sometimes, though, the burr clover can sometimes be toxic to livestock, as we pointed out, and the seed pods can be a serious contaminant of wool.
Yes, the seed pods on the medicago have little sharp points on them, and so they can attach to other things like the wool of a sheep.
That's how weeds spread.
Yes, it's a dispersal technique. Yes. That's when the medicago doesn't throw its seed pods are carried away on your pants, your shoes, your sheep, your dog, your cat. The medicago is an annual of the how many are we talking about? The three we're talking about. This one is an annual. The other two are perennials, and the ornamental oxalis are also perennials. So perennials are persistent. They have some way of living over during negative times, whether it's cold or dryness or whatever it is. And in the case of the oxalis, which is the Bermuda buttercup and the creeping wood sorrel, they have little bulbs underground.
And the University of California, on their great weed site, point out the obvious that hand weeding is used extensively to reduce infestations and get it before it sets flower.
Yes.
Yes, very important to do that. And they recommend the hoe, the hand pull, all those things that can help it, especially when you get it young.
Yes, and even if those bulbs have formed, every time you remove the top, you're forcing the plant to use the food in the bulbs to create a new plant. And so that diminishes the bulb a little bit. And then you see new growth on top, remove it again. If you do that over and over and over again, you eventually rob the bulbs of the food in them and you kill the plant. But you have to be persistent.
And here's why you don't want to mow it, for two reasons. Number one, the creeping wood sorrel survives and sets seed even when mowed as close as 1/4 inch. Chances are your mower doesn't get down 1/4 inch. And after using a lawnmower where creeping wood sorrel grows, you can have seeds all underneath the lawnmower around the blade. So you need to clean the lawnmower thoroughly. And those bulbs are difficult to remove.
Yes, sanitation is critical. These plants, these oxalis plants, can grow from certain portions of the stem. They can grow from seed. So you want to make sure that you get any equipment you use in your landscape is washed. Typically, you should wash it after you use it, before you put it away, but it's washed so you're not transmitting it yourself from place to place.
And this nasty stuff grows in lawns, too.
It does, yes. Yeah. And it can be, especially if you have a stoloniferous lawn like Bermuda or Kentucky bluegrass, it can get sort of trapped under those stolons, which are surface stems, and it can be difficult to pull out. The wood sorrel grows on a stolon itself and roots from place to place, so pulling it out can be sort of like doing a puzzle.
If you're going to use a herbicide on it and it's in a lawn situation, know the type of lawn you have because it's different chemicals for different lawns. Cool season turf grasses such as bent grass, Kentucky bluegrass, fescues, ryegrass have their own table of chemicals that can help control creeping wood sorrel. And then the warm season turf grasses like Bermuda grass, buffalo grass, kikiu grass, St. Augustine, and zoysia, they also have a list of chemicals that can control the creeping wood sorrel.
And they're all different. There's no overlap.
Yeah. And it sounds like herbicides for Bermuda buttercup is very limited since two of the four are non-selective, glufosinate and glyphosate.
So they would kill your lawn or whatever else this is growing in.
Basically, read and follow all label directions.
Always.
And I guess one, I won't say a safe way, but at least a fairly safe way is if you have the case of the Oxalis growing in a lawn situation, maybe apply a pre-emergent that's approved for use on turf.
Yes.
That might help. And they have very hard to say names, so I won't, but we'll list them in the Garden Basics newsletter as far as pre-emergent herbicides for cool and warm season turf grasses.
And if you're you don't have that list with you and you're in the garden center and looking for a chemical, read labels.
Oh, always read labels.
The labels must show the weed you're trying to control and the situation you're trying to control it in. So oxalis or wood sorrel and lawn, or oxalis or wood sorrel and ornamental landscape, something like that.
And I would think that when it comes to lawn, they'll break it down into cool season or warm season turf grasses.
So you need to know what kind of grass you have, as Fred said.
Yeah. All right. It's a tough one. It is the oxalis. Common names include creeping wood sorrel, Bermuda buttercup, and then a different genus, Medicago, and that would be the burr clover.
Yes, and that's an annual. That one. I don't think you would even want to approach using an herbicide. Just potentially a pre-emergent, but nothing for once you see the plant. Just pull it, get it out of there.
I remember I got paid to do it. I was 8 years old, and a lady down the street wanted me to come weed her front yard, which was all rocks. Mm-hmm. And it was burr clover. Mm-hmm. And I just remember how bloody my knees were.
Oh, your knees, your fingertips.
Yes.
I was weeding last week in my son's property, which has sections of rocks, and my fingertips are a little damaged because of it.
Yeah, it seems to like rocks to grow on.
Those seeds can sift right down through those rocks and get in the little crevices and germinate.
Yep, no doubt about it. Oxalis can be a bad weed or a pretty plant. Mm-hmm. All right, choose carefully.
Right.
Pick your poison. All right, Debbie, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Fred.
Want to leave us a garden question? You'll find a link at gardenbasics.net. Also, when you click on any episode at gardenbasics.net, you're going to find a link to SpeakPipe. You'll find it in the show notes. And when you bring up SpeakPipe on your computer or smartphone, you can leave us an audio question without making a phone call. Or you can go to SpeakPipe directly. That's speakpipe.com/gardenbasics. You want to call or text us? We have that number posted at gardenbasics.net. It's 916-292-8964, 916-292-8964. Email? Sure, we like email. Send it along with your pictures to fred@farmerfred.com. Or again, go to gardenbasics.net and get that link. And if you send us a question, be sure to tell us where you're gardening, because all gardening is local. Find it all at gardenbasics.net. Garden Basics with Farmer Fred comes out every Tuesday and Friday, and it's brought to you by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery. Garden Basics, it's available wherever podcasts are handed out. For more information about the podcast, visit our website, gardenbasics.net, and that's where you can find out about the free Garden Basics newsletter, Beyond the Basics. And thank you so much for listening.